Hey everyone, I'm Victoria and I'm today's moderator for the Cloud Builders session. So warm greetings to everyone. Actually, I'm glad that you have joined our amazing Cloud Builders community. Let me introduce Cloud Builders for the who are first time here. Cloud Builders is a community for the learning and inspiration. Our online events are headed by the leading industry experts whose Cloud Builders helps cloud practitioners solidify their enthusiasm and better their craft, all while bestowing knowledge. And today we have a pretty packed agenda. We will enjoy the speech from Rick Kisnah, who is a principal DevOps SRE engineer at Oracle. After that, we will have the 5 minutes coffee break. Then our Intellias expert Volodymyr Shynkar will lead a lightning talk. After the talk, we're gonna have two great fireside chats with Johan Abildskov and Volodymyr Klevko. So, during the chats, we will answer your tricky questions. Don't hesitate to ask them in the Slido app. Because, as we said, the Cloud Builders community is aimed to reach our members with the bits of knowledge. All our events will be in the BYOP format. That means bring your own problems and the Cloud AMA. Ask me anything. So today's speeches are recording and organizers will send it to your email in a few days. So don't be worried if you missed something. You will have a chance to look on them again. We will be glad to see you on our Telegram channel chat. Links you will find in the description. And for sure, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Okay, are we ready? Drop here in the chat what do you expect to learn during this build-up. And for today, let me greet our first speaker, Rick Kisnah from the Oracle. Rick is experienced engineering leader with domain expertise in DevOps, CI/CD, testing, automation, HPC, machine learning, and AI in the cloud. Rick's passion is building teams solving big-scale problems. Products he has worked and delivered are kind of Motorola phones, Aeroflex PXI, Amazon Kindle, AWS AC2 Windows, AWS Workspaces, AWS Load Balancers, Oracle Cloud Bare Metal, and Oracle HPC. And the fun fact, he managed to live and work on the 4 continents and ended up being in the Seattle. So let me introduce the keynote talk. The title is DevOps in HPC. Rick will share with us insights on how to use Terraform and Ansible to manage big clusters on the cloud. Platform to be used as an example is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Write your questions in the Slido app for the Rick, and let me welcome the Rick on stage. Hey, Rick.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you all. Thank you, Victoria, for the great introduction.
So I guess the stage is yours, and I'm happy to see you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's get the ball rolling, guys. So today, I'm going to give a presentation of how we solve a DevOps problem and how we use open source tooling to solve this problem. So without ado, let me give a brief introduction of myself and the agenda. So the agenda will be, I'm going to walk you guys through what's Terraform and Ansible. I guess this is a well-used tool in the industry. I'll walk through an introduction of what is HPC and how it has converged in the industry. And then I will walk you through the problem where we solve in my current employer, and which is pretty much applicable to every DevOps HPC community, how we use open source tooling to enable faster HPC cluster creation. And lastly, the most exciting one is the live demo. Yep. Next slide. All right, so a bit of myself. I think Victoria did a great introduction, but let me walk through my background. I've been a principal engineer for more than 10 years in the cloud. Before that, I was in the mobile industry. I am here in a personal capacity. I don't represent Amazon. I don't represent Oracle. I don't represent Google. It's basically on my experience using was open source tooling for work reason. I'm based in Seattle, been in Seattle for more than 10 years. Fun fact about me, I love to read. I read about 2 to 4 books every month. And my favorite programming language is Python. I do dabble with Java and Bash, but I principally use a lot of Python. I do contribute to the open source community for Python APIs. Yeah. All right. Let me lay down some foundation. I'm sure some of you might be familiar with Terraform and Ansible, but let me walk through the fundamentals of it briefly so that we can have a concrete baseline on how we use this tooling to solve the cluster creation. All right. Terraform is a HashiCorp product. HashiCorp is a company that's based on the West Coast. It was pretty innovative when it came out a few years back. It sort of moved the mindset of the industry to use infrastructure within coding. What it does, it's a functional programming language, and it supports a lot of cloud vendors, and it is very, very easy to use. And one example shown on the slides is how you launch a simple instance. An instance on the cloud, which is Oracle Cloud. As you can see, it's about 25 lines of code. If you're from the older school, like 10 years back, if you were going to use Java or API, with 10 lines of code would actually be about 200 lines of code, and you have to do a lot of homework to make sure the infrastructure is always reflective of your programming language. So Terraform sort of codify it, and they provide great support for different vendors. It can be supported in AWS, Azure, Oracle. So Terraform is one of those, I think, de facto standards for infrastructure along with other vendors like Puppet. So this is the language I've used in my current projects, and I love it. It's very easy. There's some subtleties you have to get used to it, especially moving from a typical programming language as Python or Java. Ansible. I want to talk about Ansible because the solution I've worked on uses a combination of Terraform and Ansible. Ansible actually is as well infrastructure programming language, but it's mostly used for provisioning. And the beauty of Ansible, if you're using it to provision host, it doesn't use any external agent. It uses SSH, but it sort of encapsulates using some modules that you can do, like example shown on the screen. I'm setting up an HTTP server on different hosts and use SSH and Yum to set it up. Very straightforward, very useful, and Terraform and Ansible work very hand in hand to solve very complicated solutions. All right, let me walk you all through what is HPC, and then we'll come to the crux of this presentation. Let me sort of lay out the foundation. HPC became very big in the last few years because the tech industry was able to process data, and in the process data faster because of evolution in chipset and CPU, etc. And in the process of processing data, you accumulate a lot of data, and so those data the industry had to figure out a way to provide more intelligence to the businesses. And HPC has been there since I was in college, like 30 years ago. It was used mostly in research project in AI, ML in most of the colleges in the States. It's only recently that the private sector got into it because they realized they can use HPC at a low cost to view trend in big data. For example, Facebook, Google, Amazon, they have a lot of customer information, and to get results, like let's say I go on Amazon, I order a baby, I don't know, I order something for my kids, books for 7 years old. They can use this data to know, okay, they can propose to me more, better prediction of what I need. This is a simple example. Facebook does that a lot, whereby they have a lot of those raw data where they can put intelligence into it and produce reports that business leaders or businesses can use to move their business ahead. So before the big evolution of the cloud, there was what we call the on-premise HPC clusters. So what a HPC cluster means, it's a bunch of hardware that is optimized for high traffic and low latency uh, workloads. What has occurred is those on-premises were expensive because of the human capital and the infrastructure capital. Cloud providers use the same concept that on-premises had by implementing the InfiniBand or Rocky, which are different protocol used, and RDMA NICs, which is special NICs that we use for high workloads. And they moved the on-premises solution to cheaper on-site solution, whereby you can provide customers who want to run huge workloads at a very low cost and at the sometimes better performance you have with on-premises. So this is a domain I've been working on for a couple of years, and I would definitely recommend that you guys have a look at the work paper I've put in the slides, because it gives a good foundation of what is the nuts and bolts of HPC and RDMA. All right, this is where I've been working for the last year or so. So this is my employer. What you're seeing in front of you in the diagram is how an RDMA HPC solution looks like and how it's provided from OCI. Other vendors in the space, Azure, AWS, have the same concept, but this is the architectural diagram which is publicly available on how the product is being sold. So let's look in the picture, if I can, which I'm highlighting with my mouse. What is it about? So data center will be me. I'm the customer. What I will do, I would launch a cloud solution which have all the hosts provisioned for me. What that means, I would have access to real-time high-performing nodes that can do RDMA HPC low latency, about 300 microsecond for 64 kilobyte packet size, which can, for 1 terabyte of data, you can process it within half to 1 hour. And this whole infrastructure is managed and configured by Oracle. So now the problem statement is, how do you provide this provisioning of this complex infrastructure to the customer without going in the nuts and bolts of calling APIs, doing network configuration? That's where the open source solution I'm going to present in the next slide solve this problem, and that will showcase the power of Terraform and Ansible. Other providers have different way of solving this problem, but Oracle is pretty unique in that sense that they provide bare metal and allows you to have full control on how you want your network to be. One thing I would like to bring to your attention of this forum is, if you look at the speed of an RDMA network, is 100 gigabit per second network card. That means you can have close to line rates of high traffic volumes. All right. So the love triangle, Ansible, Terraform, cluster. We'll use Terraform to launch the cluster in a bastion. Before I go into detail, why bastion? Most HPC network, they would have a master nodes, which we call a bastion, and a set of HPC hosts, which will be on different network. Like if you look at this diagram, there's a node it's called the head node. The head node is the master, and you'll have a bunch of HPC high volume, low latency nodes running in a different network. Why you want to do this is because in most HPC workloads, you have someone who would schedule it using open source solution like Slurm or PBS, and he will say, "Hey, I give you an example. Let's say I have a simple program. Let's say Hello World. I want Hello World to be run in my cluster of 3 nodes. So the Bastion will be taking this job, and he will send it to HPC1, HPC2, HPC3, and then collect the result back to the Bastion. So the Bastion, by design, will be on a public network. The private network will be the HPC nodes will be on the private network. All right. So the problem we're gonna try to solve is how to set up this design using our solution. So we're gonna have Terraform to launch a cluster and a Bastion. We're gonna use Terraform to set up Ansible roles on the Bastion. We're gonna use the roles to set up the cluster in the network, and we're gonna set up standard packages you might need within your cluster. So the open source solution is in this link. I hopefully you can get the slides after this talk, and I'll walk you through the code and we'll do a demo. All right, let's do a demo. All right, let me get the browser. All right. Okay, hopefully you can see the console here. Can you guys see the console? Yes. All right. What we'll do, let me start from the beginning so you guys can see where we are. I've logged into the UI that the cloud provider provides. I'm going to use the UIs to launch a cluster network, and I'll walk you through the code. All right. This stack is just a UI for you to input a Terraform script. And the Terraform script, which we're going to be putting, is over here. Oops, that came out wrong. So this is a bunch of Terraform scripts and Ansible, which I'll walk you through the logic. So what we're going to do, we're going to input this into this UI. This UI is it's called Oracle Resource Manager. It's Terraform as a service, but basically it's a UI to import Terraform code. So we're going to import the Terraform code, which is over here. I have a zip format. You can have the zip format. It's the same code. Then we're going to go and set it up. This is like Terraform, very straightforward Terraform stuff. Terraform stuff. All right. Give me a minute. I'm going to input the private key. What I'm doing here, basically, I'm filling up parameters of the Terraform, and I'll just do some basic configuration. This is just, I'm going to choose whatever machine I want to use. Those are settings that are pretty straightforward. And then we can have Slurm or we cannot have Slurm. Then that's it. You run, you create. I'll walk you through this. So this is typical Terraform plan and apply. Plan means I guess it's like compile the code but don't run it. Apply means to execute it. So let's do an apply. This takes about 20 minutes, about 10 minutes to 15 minutes, because what it does in the background, it provisions the bastion, the master, and it creates the two HPC nodes. Since this takes a while, I did one before. Let me show you how it looks like. So this is one which was completed earlier. Let's have a look at the logs. Those are typical, if some of you have used Terraform before, those are typical Terraform logs output. What is done is launch a bastion, it's configured the network, and towards the end, it does a lot of configuration because we install log packages through yum and apt-get. So as you can see, at the end of how long it took? It about 10 minutes. How long? It started at 12:56. It took about roughly about 15 minutes. It had created bastion, and it created two private networks. So let's have a look how it looks like when it's launched. So my expectation, if you go back to the slides, my expectation from this design diagram is I should have a bastion with two clusters. So let's have a look how this looks like. So I should expect by SSHing into the bastion. So right now I'm currently on the bastion, and I expect I should be able to log in into two nodes. So let's have a look over here. First node, so from a bastion, I'm able to access two node, which was launched from the class from the Terraform file. Let's have a look at the IPs. So there's a couple of things here I need to bring up. We have what we call the host itself has two NICs. One is the regular NICs for the regular network stuff to the cloud. This is pretty standard. It allows the cloud to be able to talk to the customer and talk to the cloud services. And the important one for this is what we call the RDMA NIC. So there's a bunch of command that we can show which the vendor provides that shows who's or Mellanox RDMA NIC. So what I'm looking for here, what I'm showing to you all, is those are RDMA NICs. So now let's go back to first fundamental. A regular network traffic will be about, for 64 kilobyte, it's about 1 millisecond. And RDMA traffic should be way, way less than that. So right now what we have two HPC node, and I want to see how is the traffic like for 64 kilobyte. I'm going to do a simple test just to showcase that we were able to set up a network cluster of two nodes which are high performing. So let's do this. Let's get the IPs. First, we'll do a negative test. Let's ping the regular host, the regular network card, which is this. Oops, this has got here it is. So this is a regular network, not the non RDMA NIC. So I get about about 100, 200 milliseconds. Let's try the automatic. As you can see, here we have about 100 milliseconds for regular traffic. For an RDManic, you have like 10 times lower latency. All right. Easy it is to set up a cluster network using Ansible and Terraform. Excuse me. Let us walk through the principle of the code, because let us recap before I move the code. Let's recap what we discussed. So we introduce Terraform as an infrastructure code language. We introduce Ansible as a provisioning language. And I introduced a problem statement whereby we need to configure a high power computing cluster as fast as possible, as easy possible. I went through the demonstration, excuse me, of launching the cluster using Terraform. And I went through the proof that the cluster was able to set up, configure, and ping latency values are correct. All right, let's go for the code. This code is very straightforward. It has a lot of files, but the gist of it is the Terraform files call the cloud vendor to set up the host, to provision the host. Was a typical, it looks a bit longish, but it's very straightforward. Over here, you set up the network, the cluster network, and you have a bunch of, let me go for one example. This one, basically, when you run this code, it set up the bastion with the volume and the storage. And what it does, the bastion, it sets up a bunch of Ansible code that does all the configuration. So let's go through how the configuration works. So what occurs for this configuration, it installs those agents, it installs the packages, it installs the host file so that you have the nice name HPC1, HPC2, and it set up the RDM init, the cluster FS. So let's look at one. So this is basically the main entry of the code. It uses Ansible playbook, which is a way of asking the code to execute automation, and it uses what is called the concept of rules. So let's look at one of the rules, for example. So this is the one that's pretty interesting. What it does, it set up the network card, which is this guy. So this is a network configuration which is optimized. So this code basically does that. It set up the script here. It do an IF up and IF down. Yeah, and that's pretty much what this is all about. And all this is open source. You can download it, try it. And the good thing is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure has a free tier, so you definitely can try it out. It's well supported. I guess I sort of finished early. I guess we have time for FAQ. If you guys, yeah.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah,
It was
Victoria.
interesting. demo, and actually we do have this, some of the questions, and I would love to ask them. And one of
Yeah.
them is actually when you showed the demo, it was mainly on the UX interface. So is it possible to provision Oracle Cloud without using UI console? Like, for example, run our Terraform from our terminal manually, or build some classic pipelines?
That's a great question. And the reason I use the UI, UI is more intuitive to demonstrate, but we have an amazing, we have a well-supported open source API that allows you to talk to this ORM service. This ORM service in a nutshell is just, let me try to draw if I can. All right, yeah, annotate text. So this is the Terraform file, and this is what we call the ORM service, which is a UI. So what I've done for the demo, I've sent this Terraform to the UI, and then it in the background, it executed those steps. So there's two options here. You can use Terraform directly from Xterm, from your terminal, as what we normally do. Or the second option is you can use the ORM API SDK and put the Terraform files to do that. And that fits in perfectly for automation for a lot of customers.
So in this way, you can use the CI/CD pipelines and don't touch UI interface, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I do actually internally in my team. I wrote a Python. I used the SDK, and I used the Oracle Resource Manager API, and I've used the internal pipeline for CI/CD.
So that leads to the second question. So you showed a lot of the Terraform. How do you manage the Terraform repository from the code perspective? Like, do you use modules, and how do you cover using them?
Yep, let's go through it. Those are great questions, by the way. Where did I put that repository? All right. So let's talk about Terraform, then we'll talk about the Ansible. So the Terraform portion, we are using standard HPC, HashiCorp programming standards. We've put all the outputs in an output file, and each of the modules explain the service that we want to do. So in a nutshell, let me do this. Let me write this somewhere. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let me walk you through quickly here what we've done. The Terraform, we have outputs. That's the way we structured it. Outputs, variables, resources. And then I think you do have, and you have something called scripts. So the variables are stuff that you can change on the fly using the UI or through the CLI. The resources are stuff you want to bring up on the infrastructure. So let's talk about this guy. This creates an instance pool. It's a bunch of hosts you want to collect together. Configuration does what it does. It configures the pool to have whatever shape or whatever host value you want. Cluster network does that. So output is what you want to see when you execute it. And variables are stuff you want to change on the fly. So this is pretty standardized HashiCorp way of coding, and we will follow the same procedure. So let's say next time you want to add a more resource, you can create one. And let me walk through one of the code is this one. So this is pretty straightforward. And all those snippets actually are available on the HashiCorp website. So basically what I'm doing here, we're creating a cluster network with a specific image on a specific region. Let's talk about Ansible. Ansible as well. What we've done, we follow the way Ansible provisions. You have a main entry. Site is what we have our main entry. You have different role. A role specifically does a specific function on what you want on the host. Like for this one, it disables a firewall on the private network, and the role is using the role configuration for firewall.
It's an interesting question. Like while you're on Ansible, how do you deal with the security policies? Like how do you keep updated OS images? And because technically the software update can break the things, and it's supposed to be applied everywhere at the same time.
Can you repeat that question, Victoria?
Yeah, my bad. How do you deal with the security update? So, for example, the OS images must be updated, right? Once you get the new security patches. And how do you ensure that the software update is not breaking the things? Is it supposed to be applied everywhere at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great problem we see every time. So I'm gonna do a bit of marketing here, even though I'm not talking on behalf of OCI. On Oracle Linux, updates is done through something called kplies, which is a way of applying updates to your images dynamically without rebooting it. So let's say as a customer, I've provisioned a host of 200 nodes. And every month, if you're using Oracle Linux, there's a functionality called kplies that would allows you through settings to get those updates periodically and without even you rebooting your host. And there's this options in Oracle Cloud that allows you to get updates dynamically. But there's always a possibility that it might break it. Then you might need to re-provision the host. But with kplies and dynamic update of the OS through the OS management service of Oracle, you're able to get into it seamlessly. However, because HPC is supposed to be OS agnostic, we do support other flavors. Uh, Oracle does provide other flavors, and we do every month releases new images that supposed to solve some of those fixes. And the downside of it, as I think you sort of got the gist of it, you might have at times to reprovision your whole host unless we do way of putting patches to those OS dynamically. So for other OSs, it's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Isn't that in this case, if you're putting this on dynamically, you will not find out that it's broken until you have rebooted?
Well, Oracle Linux is different because when we provide those updates for kplies, it goes through an extensive regression testing on Oracle Cloud. But that doesn't mean you might not. There's always a possibility. But historically, those dynamic updates for Oracle Linux have been pretty stable. We have customers who never rebooted for 4 or 5 years, even longer, when they're on the key with dynamic updates.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm still thinking about the Terraform part, like the example what you showed. It's really nice, but what is the best approach to manage Terraform for the extremely fast growing project? Any suggestions? It's like,
Terraform as a
how do you
service.
maybe
Yeah, go ahead.
I knew that you will go there. Yes, that's
Yeah,
interesting as well. And speaking
that's why
about
I
that,
think right?
yeah. Speaking about that as well, like, when you define everything and configure in Terraform, how do you keep tracking on, like, that you don't do the application misconfigurations? How do you bypass the application misconfigurations? Because, I mean, the human factor is still in the place, right?
Yeah, what with Terraform, what you would do is you will get the state of the union, so to speak, before you apply any change. So Terraform allows you to, it comes as part of the HashiCorp package, allows you to know what you're going to change. And before you change, you need to basically approve it. It has a sort of internal checklist. But then again, there's bound to be a mistake. If someone sees a change and still applies it, I've seen it in my daily rules, whereby people delete load balancers by mistake. But the check and balance exists in the programming language using the state files that currently exist in the programming language.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I have seen that as well. Like still, human mistakes happens. Good. Yeah, I guess I will wrap up and thank you for the great presentation and the good, exciting, actually very interesting answers. And I really enjoyed listening to you. And thanks for you coming in and spending time with us.
Thank you for having me, Victoria. It was a real pleasure to know you guys.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So I hope you have enjoyed the conversation and the talk as well, and leave your opinion in our YouTube chat. Now let's calm down and take a little coffee break. And by the way, while you're on the coffee break, you can enjoy the funny DevOps song during that. Okay, I'll be back. I hope you got the time to get a coffee or tea and you're ready for the new bit of knowledge. So let me introduce our next speaker, Volodymyr Shynkar, or Voldemort, the one who shall not be named. Volodymyr is a DevOps engineering lead at Intellias. With 8 years of the development experience, he has successfully migrated, deployed, and advised 15 projects in areas of the healthcare, gambling, e-commerce, and the automotive industry, certified safe agile software developer. And now Volodymyr will lead our lighting talk for us. The topic is Argo Rollout, Live or Die, how to do canary for your deployment. Welcome, Volodymyr.
Thank
Nice
you
to
for a
see
warm
you.
introduction. I'm really happy to be with you today and presenting this cool tool for releases, for Kubernetes releases. I hope you will enjoy it as well with me. Okay, let me start. I hope that you see my presentation. And yeah, thank you for introduction. I have my one, but let's keep it. Move to here. Today I will be showing you the tool that we recently used for our several projects, and we successfully integrated it, and customer really happy with that. And now we are able to test our applications before we release it, and after that our downtime rate reduced for several zeros. So we are quite happy about that. And today I will be sharing my experience with you. First of all, we'll be talking today about Argo tools. Here's the 4 tools that Argo releases. It's Argo CD, Argo Workflows, Argo Rollout, and Argo Events. And today we'll be mostly focusing on Argo Rollouts. So Argo Rollouts, it's additional customer source definition for Kubernetes, which helps you to adjust and improve your releases, release your Helm charts, or just simple applications inside your Kubernetes cluster. It supports lots of tools like Istio, simple ingress controller, or application ingress controller could be integrated with any tools. And also it supports lots of metric providers. The most famous, it's Prometheus, Datadog, New Relic, and Wavefront. And also it supports custom integrations, etc. How does the controller work? So basically, Argo Rollout introduces 3 additional CRDs, and the most important is rollout. Basically, using this tool, this config, you can use as a reference existing deployment or describe a deployment inside your rollout. It supports the same keys, the same configuration as simple deployment. As you can see here, you can make a reference to workload refer and specify your deployment without changing or modifying something. So it's easy to integrate. It's just 10 minutes and you're ready to go. Additionally to your rollout, you can create analysis template, which is basically will be using your queries providers like Prometheus or Datadog. You will be able to run queries against it and analyze how your application progressing, and if there is any errors, or what is the response time, or even you can check the latency. You can do whatever you want because you will be having access to your monitoring system, and whatever you can get from there, you can use in this analysis template. So let me run some demo for you. And first, I would like to introduce you Argo CD is the tool that I was using for deploying all the configurations. As you can see here, I have deployed Argo Rollouts as well as Prometheus and the demo application. Let's see what we have here. So basically, it's a simple application which has a deployment, And additionally, I deployed rollout here. So the configuration here, simple Helm chart with a demo tool provided by Rollout by the Argo guys, and I'm going to change something. Since we have Argo CD, it will trigger automatically for me. So let's change something here. For example, the request and limits, because in order to trigger rolling update or canary update, we need to change something which is related to deployment. Since all my configurations is available in a code, I'm doing a git commit. And by the way, you can find all the resources, this repository in the internet. I will share this link and you can use and integrate in your system. I have committed change. The Argo CD found that these changes, and rollout started immediately a new set here with one pod, because we have a rules here, steps. Let me show you steps. I have specified to set 25% for my replicas. I have 4 replicas here. So 25% is one replica. Then it has stabilization period for a few seconds. And yeah. And after that, we have this analysis run. This is how it looks in a Argo Rollout dashboard. We can see all the steps here. We set 25% of weight. Now we run analysis. Here's my query. It's a simple query. It's basically counting the CPU usage, because since all the configuration is deployed in my Minikube, I don't have any exporters, and I used any available metric for me, which is available from Prometheus, because it doesn't really matter. For a demo, you can use wherever you want and count any metric you want to display in your system. I have specified to run it 3 times, each 30 seconds. And also we can specify a failure limit. For example, if this check will fail 2 times during this execution, the Argo will roll back this pod and will stay with older version. As you can see here, we have revision 2. So it means that it's a new version, and you can easily roll back to previous version just by one click, which I really likes in Argo Rollout. Also, there are a few other features called promote full. If we release something, for example, some hotfix, and we don't want to wait while Argo Rollout promote all the replicas, for example, we have 100, yeah, and we have tests for 1 hour, then we can promote in one run and it will deploy it immediately. As you can see here, steps are progressing and we almost at the final stage. We also have an application deployed. Let me open it. So it's basically its demo application, which is testing the connection. Yep, we successfully deployed the application, or not yet. Yeah, we are on 75%, and after 10 seconds, the 4th replica will be deployed. After some time, if I'm not mistaken, 30 seconds, the stabilization period is default value. The old replica will be destroyed. So let's wait for a while. The next example, I will change my query in order to fail the analysis run, and then you will be able to see what has happened if analysis run will not pass. So let me change it here. For example, change the comparison in this side. So CPU usage will not be more than 5, so we will have a fail for this release. Yep, as you can see here, the revision 2 is now active, and revision 1 replica set doesn't have any changes here. I mean, not any pods. So since we have committed changes, we will see that this analysis template has updated, and we have a feature called, we can't retry because previous one was successful. Let's change something else once again here. Let's change the same value here. And again, version 3 should be deployed. Revision 3 as well here. We should see it. Revision 3, and it's progressing. Other thing, we have 5 pods here, and traffic from outside goes to all 5 containers, which means we are able to test a traffic for only a certain amount of people, for example, 10% or something like that. We also have a feature called traffic management. We don't have it specified here yet, but with that you can manage how many percent we want to go to the specific pods, or how many to which service we want to do that. We also can separate traffic to other source, to other ingress, not to mix it with real people. We can do it's pretty agile thing, and you can configure it to your needs. We can see the difference, what is going on. Not difference, the status of executions, and we can see here that it failed 3 times in a row, and it marked as degraded, and the replica of revision 3 was terminated. What we can do in this case, if we roll back the comparison sign to make sure that our replica, our analysis run will be successful, you will see that this will update it, and then we can do a retry. We will spawn again the same replica, and new analysis run will be created, and once it's successful, the replica 3 will be deployed to full. Not to full, by each step as we described here. While it's progressing, I will show you the configuration, how it looks like. So we have analysis template. It's really a simple thing, and the rest of configuration is here. So it's basically the name of metric that we are using here. We use provider, which is Prometheus, the endpoint to it, and the query then we run inside it. And we have configurations. The rollout basically has just a strategy here. We specify the canary service, the stable service, the traffic routing, we do have it, and the steps. The steps is basically here. It's pretty simple. You just specify it in a row, and it goes through it. All right. It seems like that. Oh, yeah, it works. Second analysis run for revision 3. This one was successful. And now we deployed second pod, which is basically 50% of our workloads. We can see here, this is a dashboard specifically for Argo Rollouts. And we can see here 2 analysis runs. First one was failed, and second one was successful because we adjusted it and make sure that it will be successful. And this is how the Argo Rollout works. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm sure that you have some questions, and I will be happy to answer to that questions.
Full of a nice and great demo. I was wondering, like, Kubernetes, it's a lot of the tooling when it comes to the orchestrating. So what are the scenarios when you should choose the Argo and when there's
sorry,
not
I don't
work?
hear you.
You can't hear me? I'm still here. Can you hear me? Hello? It seems we are experiencing some technical issues.
No.
No?
Unfortunately,
Technical assistance, please.
No.
Okay, I guess I'm back. I hope you can hear me and just give a thumbs up. This is the best time to say thank you to the company who actually supported us and made this event happen. Intellias is one of the biggest IT companies in Ukraine, ranked among the best IT employers by Forbes and Dow. And it's not a big surprise, since a human attitude is what Intellias stands for. So you have the opportunity to experience how it is to work for the top-notch IT employer. Please check the details in our chat. And now it's a time for the Fireside chat. And we have the first speaker with us on the Fireside chat, the first guest, and we are going to focus on automation in DevOps. We are looking forward to your questions. Drop them in the Slido app. Let me introduce Johan. Johan is a software engineer at Uber from Denmark. He cares about the software delivery and the people that do it. The key objective of Johan is to help software engineers build better software faster, while also improving their work environment. Johan has been working as a continuous delivery and DevOps consultant and trainer since 2015. He excels in Git, Jenkins, Gradle, Atlassian, and all of other tools that help facilitate software delivery. And a fun fact, Johan has spent 10 years in the student community at the Faculty of Science playing the bass in cabaret. So now we know where that DevOps song came from. Hey Johan.
Hello, Victoria. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for that great introduction.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Late, beautiful evening. The kids are not too noisy in the background, so it couldn't be better. I just spent some 2 days in Zurich at DevOps Days Zurich, where I also got to give a talk called Automation is Hard, and we're doing it wrong. So for me, that has been the perfect lead-in to talking about automation and DevOps here.
Oh, so you gave me a green light to ask you all the dirty problems with the DevOps, right?
Exactly. Anything goes.
That's anything. Okay, yeah. But what news you can bring us from the DevOps conference? I'm wondering where the DevOps is going. Like, how do you see it in the future?
So we see more and more focus on automation not being something that we strive for because it will give us a competitive advantage, but more and more something that if we don't have it and are doing it and are focusing continuously on our automation capabilities, then we're lagging behind the pack. We're losing our edge. We're losing our ability to just keep up because we're getting bogged down by all sorts of different things. Like if we spend too much of our time on deploying stuff rather than using the awesome Argo CD, then we will not spend our time on creating value. And the same goes with tests and builds and everything. So like, even though there is in DevOps a ton of focus on the culture and continuous improvement and all these kinds of things, then automation has become more and more something that is a prerequisite and something that you must do, and not something that you can choose to do. It has become mandatory and permission to play. And even if we look at the state of DevOps reports, we can see even those who are categorized as low and medium performers are automating more and more. So if you're not good at automation, make sure you become good at automation. It should also be one of the foundations of what we could call professional software engineering and delivery. So at least that's where I see automation coming.
So automation is answer to the old problems. Doesn't bring its own problems.
Oh, automation, like the best way to automate if you can just stop doing something instead, right? I think it's Peter Drucker, a great management thinker, who once said, there is nothing so useless as very efficiently doing that which should not have been done at all. And I really like that frame of mind, because when we think of automation, we often think about automating activities. And what it's all about is creating better outcomes, better customer value, and things like that. And we don't do that if we just focus on what are the activities that we have that we could automate or make more efficient. That doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes, depending on how we approach it. And simultaneously, all the automation that we have, that's also software. That's also stuff that we need to build and maintain, and that we build in all of our biases and stuff in. So when, for instance, we look into automation in the security DevSecOps, there are probably many things that shouldn't be handled by automation, but that should be handled by education. And I'm saying that because I think you're like senior architect of DevSecOps or something like that, so you probably have an opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm guilty for that. I'm like one of the DevSecOps practitioners, so to say. And I usually tend to say, like, automate the security so we have more time for the education. And that kind of covers what you are saying, that not everything should be automated. A lot of the things should be clearly educated. But since you have touched this one, I experienced the same issue. Maybe you have seen this in the DevOps, because DevOps is not only about the automation, right? It's as well about the processes and the people. And when I speak about implementing the security in DevOps, the first and the foremost question I do get is the developers were like, hey, we already need to learn so much if we want to have the full cycle of the DevOps, and suddenly we need to learn a bit about the infrastructure and how to automate, or vice versa. Then infrastructure people like, oh, we need to develop, we need write scripts. So that leads to the question like how to sharp the skills and how to keep up to date with all the recent technology. So uh, how do you manage this? Because right now on the previous talk we saw there is another tool for the Kubernetes what you need to learn, and all those tools are coming and all that knowledge. So how do you keep pace?
So that is an excellent question, and there are so many different ways to unpack that and think about that. I think like the first and extremely boring question is like, we probably don't need to everyone be at the forefront of choosing and developing the newest technologies. It is okay to let other people figure out what's the most awesome way to do stuff and then just run along when we decide that. But I think generally, so that's one thing, like saying we need to perhaps be quite sharp on where we get deep knowledge and where we just keep awareness of what's going on. And keeping just awareness of what's going on so we can figure out what to invest more effort into learning, I think that can help a lot, and that will be possible to do on a relatively low effort. But we can also say that for many things, the key driver for everything is make sure that we have slack in our calendars, right? The more load we are under, the less we will be able to keep up, and the less we will be able to be as a team resilient towards variance such as incidents or change of priorities and all sorts of things. Like the harder the more busy we are, the less space we have to wiggle. And then there's also something, because we have this tendency that you also alluded a bit to, that we say, well, we need to be full stack developers, we need to have DevOps teams that are autonomous and have all the skills they need. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs to know everything, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there are no specialists both inside and outside of the team. So in the case of security, which I'm not very knowledgeable about, but you are, so you can tell me if I lie. There are tons of things that we can do to, let's say, shift left on things. And we can both have security experts outside of the team trying to enable the development team, the DevOps teams, in terms of both coaching and teaching. But it might also be in terms of supplying secure processes, helping with supplying secure libraries. If you use these libraries for authentication, then you're secure by default, to the degree that that statement makes any sense. Or like if we want to deliver a new feature, a larger feature, we have discussions with the security experts at the beginning of our iteration and not at the end where it becomes a security gate. So in that way, we say, well, we need to be security enabled and security aware, but the development team doesn't necessarily need to be security experts. And it's okay that we both have experts and specialists and more rounded just developers, at least in my opinion. And it might also be possible, we talk a bit about shifting left, like moving feedback closer and closer to the developer. And that's probably also some of the things that you think about when you say we want to automate some of the security checks so we can spend our time on teaching instead. But we might also be able to shift things down into our platforms, the platforms that we build on top of. Like what are the things that we don't have to take care of because that's handled on the platform that we develop to and on. So I think that's my thinking, but everything depends on how do you do it. The most important thing is probably that you're not too busy to have time for anything.
Yeah, who cares about the security, right? There's that famous sentence.
Yes, it's
but
not
you
important until
actually,
it's very important.
come on, security is not important. I'm joking. But actually, you touched a quite important thing. Like we discussed the DevOps in the sense of having it in-house, right? But sometimes some big organizations, they may get the consultants, or they may even outsource. Have you seen how does it work? Can you outsource the full DevOps? Would you outsource it for the 100% somewhere, especially like on the different physical location?
So
Or
that
are there any
question.
successful stories
So I
on that?
think that is a question that really many people and organizations sit with, like pondering, how do we do DevOps and can I some way buy it? Right? That's also always the question. How can I obtain this magical DevOps nirvana that so many people are talking about? For me, DevOps is not something that you buy or do, or it is more something that you do. So for me, DevOps is a part of the way that we develop software. So what people are usually trying to outsource is perhaps their cloud or their infrastructure or their automation or things like that. But for me, DevOps is more broadly the way we work with developing and maintaining software. So as long as we're developing and maintaining software, we can't outsource our DevOps. But we might buy our infrastructure somewhere else.
Yeah, but if you stay here, like for example, if I'm outsourcing all my development team and I do have the product owner inside of the company, and at the same time I do have a outsourced team even in another country, technically you can integrate that the DevOps culture because I mean they are developing, right? So you just integrate that in their
Yes.
development process.
So at least in my experience, and please supply with your own because you have probably also a large contact interface, I see more and more of the large organizations that have outsourced their development trying to pull it back in-house. And I think that's somewhat about the conflict about what are the incentive structures, what are the silos, how do you take ownership of a product where you don't own it and it's outside of the organization. Even it's difficult enough if you're inside the same organization but in different locations or teams or sub organizations. But very much of the problematic behaviors that has happened in traditional organizations that has led to the agile and DevOps revolution comes from having misaligned incentives. And if you have outsourced development, most likely those that you have outsourced to have misaligned incentives compared to an in-house development team. Like, what is the incentive for a software consultancy that you pay at an hourly rate to improve their software capabilities such that they spend less hours delivering the same amount of software? So it becomes very muddled, and we know that incentives shape behavior. So I would be careful about, I would at least be very focused on what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And are those outcomes better achieved with in-house or outsourced development? And if we're going to be a technology or software first organization, if we're going to be a digital organization in any way, I think that we at least need to have some in-house development capabilities and thus can't outsource our DevOps capabilities. But that's just my opinion.
Oh, to be honest, I would agree. I would say I would agree for the 100%. And this is what I have seen so far, that the companies who try to implement the DevOps, of course, it always starts with let's do the automation and rewrite everything as an infrastructure as a code, and then at some point they realize that it's a bit more than just the code. It's as well about the sharing the responsibility and even at some point transforming the business to become more agile in that sense. And they start to see that the model of the outsourcing may not work as well, like you say, just because the outsource sometimes doesn't buy the company's values as an internal team. But everything as well as always starts with the automation, and it's a bit interesting road what I have experienced that there are some companies who try still keep the balance between let's automate everything, but still have infrastructure and devs separated. Have you seen this, or how does it work? Like, what do you think about that model?
So I think, and again, everything I say is opinion and not fact. But I think we have a choice to make, and it's about how we interface with the software that we buy. Because I think the only way to buy software is to not have it developed for you, but by subscribing to already existing software. Point and case, if I buy software, it's because I buy a product such as Office 365 or something, or I buy cloud services or something. I don't believe that you can say, I want to buy a piece of software that I can sell, so now you, some outsourcing partner, need to develop this piece of software for me. Because I believe that software development is inherently a collaborative discipline and tightly coupled to the domain knowledge and organization, read things like Conway's Law. And buying a piece of software is the ultimate like waterfall. It's doomed to fail or be delivered so late that it misses the target completely. So I think if you want to buy a piece of software from someone, you're going to outsource the HR part of it and buy access to a development team that you could treat as if it was one of your own development teams, but might have some advantages in terms of risk or cost or recruiting, onboarding, some things. But building a piece of software is a collaborative process. And if you're not going to take 100% part in that collaborative process, you should buy something that is already done, in my opinion.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, I have seen this type of what we call as a waterfallish DevOps. Like, but you have the mix of the waterfall and the DevOps, and it becomes a bit more complex. And I think if you look on success criteria for the DevOps, in your mind, what are the success criteria like for the DevOps? Let me give the examples. Like,
yes.
Yeah, I have seen that sometimes the DevOps initiative starts from the developers, and sometimes that initiative may come from the top management. So, in your experience, what works the best? I mean, which of the scenario is more successful, and what are the other factors what leads to DevOps success?
So, if we boil DevOps down to some of its original roots, it's about breaking down silos, right? And that means that we should be able to measure our DevOps success in terms of business outcomes. And that can be really difficult. And I think the same goes for anything agile and all sorts of things. If we can't measure it in terms of business outcomes, either we don't know how we provide value, or we just have a ton of homework to do. So I believe that DevOps is not a technology transformation, it's a business transformation. And that means that our outcomes should be measured directly in business outcomes. One caveat or thing that we should pay attention to is that if we frame our DevOps transformations as cost down, like we will do DevOps because it will be cheaper, I think that the DevOps transformation is going to fail. Because it is missing much of the point. And I do believe that we can create value cheaper for DevOps, but I think that initiatives driven by this cost down will not do the things that will have the highest impact on business outcomes or any outcomes really, because then it becomes much more focused on if we spend X hours on deployment and we can automate that, then we can save those hours for something else. Rather than focusing on if it takes 10 minutes to deploy, we can learn much faster, and that will become a totally different driver. And I think that belief that DevOps isn't just a cost down initiative, that needs to be understood by the top management for it to be a success in an organization. But sometimes the only way to do that in an organization is to not ask for permission to do a DevOps transformation, but just start working in a DevOps way until you will just show better business results than those who do not. And then you have like strong-armed upper management into buy-in because now you have shown results.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, I don't know, have you had the chance to read those famous books like the Phoenix Project and then the Unicorn Project came out? So I guess it reflects what you are talking about, like just it's better to ask for the forgiveness, right, than for the permission. So
I think
from your experience, yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah. So just to like put a tail on that, I think that some engineering organizations or some software engineers, we end up in a situation where we impose more powerlessness on ourselves than we have to. So we ask for permission to write automated tests rather than just saying this is part of being a software engineer. I'm working professionally with building software, so of course I will write automatic tests, or I will of course refactor something. And it might on the very, very short run deliver less business value. But in the even short to medium term, it will be much better. So why is it that we always put ourselves in a situation where we ask for permission to do it right? When we as educated, smart professionals know the right way to do something, or at least a right way to do something, why do we then go ask for permission? And I think we need to take back that ownership, that accountability for our craftsmanship or our technical excellence. Not because it's fun for like purely academical reasons, but because we know through experience, through reading, through community, through everything, that if we do it this way, it will be better. And if we do it this way, it will be worse. And it will not be worse in 6 months or in 3 years. It will be worse tomorrow. And we start paying that interest on our technical debt instantly. So I think we should really reflect on what is it that we actually can do. And I think we can do more than our intuition tells us.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that statement actually, and I want to stay on this positive note and the inspirational note. And I have one tricky question for you. As for today, you are the software engineer, right? Any plans to become as an architect?
So I don't really know what an architect does actually, but I think one really interesting thing to ponder that I don't have. One thing that I ponder at least at times at night, lying sleepless, is what is actually software architecture and what is it that we're trying to achieve with architecting, and at what levels do we architect in an organization, because there are small architecture decisions like, do we use a first in or last out queue? How do we structure our code and files, modules, classes, hierarchies, depending on language. And then there's more like the architecturing of the integrations, like how do we split our domain into software and how do these interact. And I think there is much interesting work to be done at all levels, and it's probably about choosing the level of abstraction that you feel you can contribute the most to. And I think there's both value in thinking about enterprise architecture, team architecture, and all those kind of things, and just building better software at the low level. For me personally, what I'm doing is trying to go down a few layers of abstraction these days, where I've been a DevOps consultant for some years, and now I just build software. So that's on a completely different level of abstraction, and I think that builds some good skills. But I think that it takes just interest and focus, and then again reading everything Martin Fowler writes, and perhaps the book Designing Distributed Systems by Brendan Burns, and then you become a bunch smarter.
Yeah, it's quite important, like not to become too siloed, like sitting in the ivory tower after the while, right? Because
Yes.
I mean, there are so many great architects who came from the engineering side, but if you get too far away, you can lose the connection back to the engineering, and
Yes.
that's at least my observation, what I have seen. Like the some architects tend to be too much far away from the work on the field, right?
I think that the same, you could say the same with security, or you could say the same with testing capabilities, all our infrastructure, all those kinds of things. And if we look at the trends these days, I think all those specializations are working more towards going from being a silo of competence to become a coaching role. Like whether it's coaching about security or architecture or testing, it's all about enabling the DevOps team, right? And that also lowers the cognitive load on the DevOps teams. So I think you really have a strong point. Like we need to get those who make the decisions close to the action, because that's where the knowledge is to take decisions. And that doesn't conflict, in my opinion, with the need for specializations. And I think one fun way to approach this, or powerful way to approach this, is with mob or ensemble programming, where you group program. It's like pair programming, but in extreme. You group the program together, the entire team, on one computer. There are some rules, look them up. There are clever people that can talk about how you do that. And one thing that's excellent about that is both that newcomers to the team, they contribute extremely quickly because they can just participate in this. But you can also from time to time have testers, architects, security people, or anything participate naturally in these mob programming sessions, contributing their specialist knowledge while being a part of the team and being a part of the action. So that's an incredibly strong tool for knowledge sharing and productivity.
And I would say as well, for keeping feet on the ground for the people who tend to sit in their own silos and doesn't see what happens in other areas like the development, like you say. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that the company should practice with more and more and put some infra security guys in the development team sometimes.
Yes.
And
So I can recommend the lovely Emily Bash. She wrote a book called Technical Agile Coaching with the Salmon method. Salmon is Swedish for together, I think. And she has really focused on like this. There's a missing career path for people who are those who enable other engineers to become better, generally, like. And so if in any way that you're in a position where you enable your team members, your colleagues, someone else, or you would like to be interested in some methods to do that, I really recommend that you look up Emily Bash and the Salmon method.
somehow I missed that book. That's a good reference. I'm just writing down for myself, and I'm going to read about that. And so we could have a discussion next time about that book and how does it work in our companies.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Johan, the time flies with you, but unfortunately we need to wrap up. And it was a pleasure to talk with you. And I hope to see you soon again at some occasions and have a more chat with you. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you
to us.
for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Have a nice one. Okay. So let's continue with our second guest, and we will switch the gears towards slightly different topic from the technologies and a bit more on the human side. So we are going to talk about the remote work and mental health. Prepare your questions. And our second guest is Volodymyr Klevko, solution architect at GitLab. Volodymyr is from the Netherlands. He is an IT professional with the 10 plus years of the extensive experience in the software development, system business processes, analysis, and system integration. And his expertise, the key expertise are the complex distributed system development, system architecture design, technical problem solving, teamwork, system integration, data processes, workflows modeling, distributed systems. And some of the fun fact, as always, most probably you have seen him, especially on the avatars and all of the pictures with the short hairs on, but you know how it is, expectation vs reality. Let's Volodymyr with the long hairs. And isn't that part of the remote working? Hey, Volodymyr.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you for lengthy introduction. That was a huge list. Actually, like half of that I'm not practicing anymore, right? But that's good for CV all the time. Thank you.
Yeah. Next time I'm going to try to read all your CV, and then I guess our fireside chat is going to be done, right? So
most probably. I'm good. The sun is shining, which is quite strange for September in Netherlands. Usually it's heavily raining. So it's absolutely fantastic weather, fantastic feelings because it's September, it's warm, plus 27. So enjoying the last days of the summer.
Yeah, and that goes quite close to that topic what we want to discuss today. Like for myself, this week was really hectic for me. So I was spending from the 8 to 8 near the computer just because working remotely. And to be honest, I couldn't join the sun. And the first thing what comes into my mind, I was like, hey, I'm going to talk with Volodymyr, and I want to ask him, how do you balance both things? While you're working remotely, how you don't feel that, hey, I need to finish this one, and it's already 10 p.m. How do you balance your life and the remote work?
That's a good one. That's a very good question because basically what you have to figure out for yourself first, if you are working for life or you are living for work, right? This is the fundamental question you have to answer to yourself. Once this is done and you decided that, okay, I work for life, but not the other way around, it's becoming easier to make these decisions, right? Because if you feel already tired, it's time to get up. and just have a coffee, talk to your children, talk to your partner, talk to your friends, see your friends, which is super important, right? Because basically working remotely brings another huge problem is I would call it desocialization, right? We can touch on that one later, but actually it's about your attitude, right? If the attitude is correct, it's very easy to balance. You have to answer this fundamental question first of all. And of course, in Netherlands, it's easier because, especially if you have kids, all the daycares are closed at 6, right? So by 5 o'clock, you want it or not, you have to pick up your kids.
Oh, actually, you brought the two questions already in my mind. It's like, what if I have that answer, but I'm still a highly responsible person? Sometimes it's kind of hard to say no, especially when the colleagues are asking. So that as well. Like, some people, when you work remotely, they tend to play on these your highly responsibility level. So they ask you the questions and you feel like you're forced to get the work done. Even you have the children, sorry, I got this in Norwegian right now, Barnehagen, the closed, like the children's school closed at 6 p.m., but still you need to finalize the work. Like, how do you fight these highly responsible person vs I'm working for the work, not like for the life, if you see what I mean?
I absolutely get your point, because this is something I've been used for, right? So I usually, I'm a responsible person. I'm doing my work perfectly if I can, but I do not allow others to utilize my time, because basically I made this decision that my time is the most precious thing that I have in my life, right? All resources on the entire earth you can buy for money, except for the time, right? Time is something you cannot buy. And basically with all that thought process that took me a number of years, I would say, I just started to say, no, I will look at that tomorrow. It's hard. It's very hard being super responsible person, but you have to make this shift, right? Because you have to love your time, because again, this is something you cannot buy out. You can buy out any kind of resource except of the time. It's crucial to understand this, and actually the skill of saying no, I will look at that tomorrow 9 o'clock my time, is also precious.
Yeah, this is something what I guess I need to learn. But
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, I will keep you posted how it goes. It's but once you learn all of that stuff, and as well, like you mentioned, you're a very responsible person, and I was wondering, have you experienced that procrastination part as well? Like, hey, I can do that task maybe tomorrow, and especially maybe at the beginning of your remote working experience. Have you experienced this, like that you could postpone the tasks and just to procrastinate, open the Facebook, like, yeah, I still have a time to finish it. Let's watch some YouTube video or something like that.
I can 100% relate to that, right? So I think that all people in somewhere deep inside are huge procrastinators, right? So I can do that later. I better do it later, or I do that tomorrow, or maybe some other days. Like we're starting to go into sports, right? Next Monday. So it's all the same mechanics, I think. But basically, I faced that not in the beginning of my all remote career, which started back in Kiev in, I think, 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, at that time, it was not a problem, because I was working as a freelancer on an hourly paid basis. So that was basically my motivator to do the tasks and so on in time, because I was paid per hour. I actually faced this when I used to be a consultant, right? So when you're working from home or you're working from some co-working space and you're not getting this time pressure or customer pressure, you keep postponing until this needs to be done, right? Like till the very last moment, like tomorrow is a customer meeting in the evening, late in the evening, you're finalizing all that stuff. And of course, you're running into some problems you have to fix immediately. And yeah, all that fun begins, basically. How I came to the solution was, again, that was a lengthy process. So I worked for a number of years full remote already. And I started in the beginning to plan my day, but I always included the time for procrastination into that, because you cannot throw it away. This is in our human nature. We just need to switch context, and this is how we get rest, right? So you cannot program or write some documentation or talk to customers like 8 hours in a row. That's just not impossible. You need to take some bit of rest. And for me, I would say the savior was power naps, right? So I was planning my day that until 9 till 12, this is lunchtime here in Netherlands, I do the majority of the stuff that needs like a heavy lifting stuff, right? That's according to my plan. From 12 to 1, I'm having my lunch and I'm having my power nap. So that's my time. It just actually excluded from all the schedules. And then I have actually the rest of the day also lined out and planned. So I know at every point of time what I'm doing, right? Not minute by minute, of course, but in general, like I need to read this, I need to answer to this person, to that person, to that person. I need to have a chat with product team and so on and so forth, right? So it actually narrowed down to the correct planning, I would say.
So sometimes we are quite strong in our planning, but there are external situations, like especially now when the COVID came, a lot of the people who were quite fine in the office work and they were forced to come to the remote working. So it wasn't their decision, it was the situation, right? And they were like, okay, highly motivated, I have all the plans, but the physical conditions or the external conditions are not the best ones. Like it's one thing when you have like 2 rooms in the apartment where you can just lock the room and say, don't contact me while I'm on the work. I'm technically working. But how to deal with remote working when you got in the situation that you haven't signed up for that, but you're forced to do the remote working. And for example, you live with family, with the small children in the 1 rooms apartment or the 2 rooms apartment, but still, like, children can come and say like, hey, look at my pictures, and look at what I have drawn, all these distortions. So anything what you could rely or share as an experience?
Basically, the hardest part to start working remotely, even if you're forced to, is basically make this statement that you actually working, right? I mean, make this statement towards your family, because children as well. That took me a lot of time, and it's still not there because my children keep coming to my meetings, to my conversations to customers, showing me something, and just be easy with that. Right, so it's not a problem, and it's, again, use that time for a context switch. Use this time to relax, because children, they actually come to show you something because they want your attention, and that's time well spent, I think, with your children. That's actually bad for work because you're switching the context constantly, and it makes it hard to finalize your tasks, to focus on something, especially if you're actually do the coding work. It's a little bit easier when you're doing like more talkative work, like I do, right? That's a bit easy. But if you have to focus, you have to educate them, right? So, okay, this is a new reality. And even if you see me, we are sitting in the same room, I'm not here, right? And especially for children, you have to give children time frame, because children, they do not understand uncertainty. Like, I need to do this, right? They want to that answer for how long. Like, you can play games with them. Like, you give me an hour, okay, then we play for 15 minutes, right? Children are easy to manage. I think that the hardest part for me was to make this agreement with my partner, right? Because she was seeing me sitting at home. And again, when a developer is at work, you can imagine that probably he is not doing anything or procrastinating. Why cannot I just ping him to get the trash outside, right? That's a very common thing. And for me, it was actually helpful to have that conversation. That was pretty hard. That, okay, dear, I love you so much, but 9 to 1 o'clock, I'm at work. Even if you see me, I'm not available. Like, all the garbage cans and all that stuff just comes after, or after I'm finished, like 5, 6, 7, whatever the timing is, right? And the other thing is to split working hours, because during the COVID we had a hard lockdown here, so we had 2 kids both working remotely, and we had to share the time. But again, that goes down to an agreement who is going to do one's job at a certain period of time. And we actually broke it down like day by day. Like, Monday I work in the morning, my wife works in the afternoon, right? And then we do the rest of the work when children go to bed. That was a solution for us, right? Tuesday, it's vice versa, but still we have the time in the evening to finalize our stuff, because we still have to work 8 hours. So I think it's a lot about making these conversations happening and making sure that your family support you in what you're doing, and they have the enough flexibility to support you in what they're doing. But you have to remember that you have to be flexible as well, right? If you're requesting something from anyone, you have to give it back. Like, if you ask for flexibility, give it back. Like in that example with children. Children need your attention. After all, you're either their mother or father.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's easier, like, to have agreement with the closest one. But I was wondering as well, like, for me, remote working is, I would say, it's quite new thing. I'm not so experienced as you, but the another thing what I feel sometimes is like being disconnected from my colleagues. So how do you avoid this issue, or don't you feel disconnected from your colleagues while working remotely? And how do you keep the team spirit on the remote work?
That's a very good question. I was referring to it when I was using this term desocialization, which is pretty hard to pronounce, to be honest. Basically, this is one of the hardest aspects of working fully remote, because you only see people like on a screen, right? You cannot make this connection between a person you see on the screen and the real person, because I think that 90% of my colleagues I work with in a GitLab, I have never seen in person, right? From one hand, it's a shame, it disconnects me from them. But from the other hand, GitLab has a very well established system of mitigating this. And we have these coffee chats. So basically, how it works is the following way. So you find a person, I don't know, on Slack, on a company website, on email. We have a bot that provides the functionality of finding random people and have a coffee chat, right? So a coffee chat is usually a half an hour meeting where you just drink coffee, talk about everything, you're getting to know your colleagues, and it's not necessarily your team. So it's all across the organization. Right. So if I find like a spot in our sales time, right, I can easily drop him a coffee chat and just go and talk to him without mentioning anything about work-related activities, right? And even though it's on the screen, it actually gives you an opportunity to get to know more people than you would normally do being in the office. Because now GitLab is at, I think, 1,200 people already, if I'm not mistaken, and growing. And I must say that I probably talked to half of those, right? And this tooling, like coffee chatting, helped a lot, and I suggest anyone who is working remotely start practicing that, because that gives you an opportunity that you're working not with robots or pictures. You're still working with live people, because when you drop on that coffee chat, you can ask, like, how is the weather in, let's say, Denmark, right? Oh, it's raining, it's nasty, not very nice. Like, how are your children? Are you married? What sports you're going into, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it actually evolves into closer connection, and you start talking to each other on Slack on a daily basis. Then you start probably talk to each other on some other messengers, not work related, right? I actually made some friends from Lithuania and from Ireland, well, because we found common interests. We, for example, all mountain bikers, right? And we can actually drop each other message videos, links to a gear, and that keeps us very connected, even though we don't even work together, right? And we found out this by chance. So it depends if you really want to talk to people, and if you want to get engaged, there are mechanisms for doing that even on fully remote work.
Yeah, that's an actually very good practice, and I can correlate to that because we have pretty similar bot. It just called Icebreaker, so it just shows up and the team is like, "Hey, this is a new person. Let's have a coffee with that person," and you meet, like you say, and you talk about everything, and sometimes you get the so big surprises in the positive way, like with you. At least you learn something new, and like you say, it is possible to meet more people than comparing with the physical office where you're just limited by the physical location. And it brings as well the fun fact, like you may communicate with that person for the many months or even year, and then suddenly, like even if you communicate on the camera, but then suddenly you get the physical meeting, and it's like, oh yeah, I was imagining you slightly different, right?
Yeah, I have a very funny story with my hiring manager who hired me, and we met before in the before COVID era. We met in person, and he was like 2 meters 20 centimeters tall. Right, I'm 178 or something, so not really short. But when I saw him, I was like, okay, I did not imagine you that tall.
Yeah, that's I would say one of the fun sides of the remote working, like when you get this imagination vs reality. But still, if I won't get back, if I won't go back to the sum of the problems, how do you disconnect? Like, how do you? I don't mean physically. Like, sometimes it's enough just to switch off the computer and just go and do the sport activity or the hobbies. But how do you disconnect your mind? Like, when your brain still are in the work mode where you go to sleep and you still processing. Are there any tricks what you are using just completely shift your mind from the work?
Music. Well, for me, it was a great answer. I used to play music for quite a long period of time. I graduated from a musical school back in school, so that was quite a while ago. And I'm just getting back into music. So I started again to play the instrument. I bought another instrument. I started to play bass guitar because I just like the sound. And that actually makes me disconnected pretty well, because this is something new. This is absolutely unrelated to my day-to-day activities, not related to technology aspects, so to say. to a certain extent. I mean, it's still technology aspect in electric bass playing, for example, with all these, electric circuits and effects, how they transform the sound of the guitar because of the transformation of the sound waves. This is like totally different domain for me, and this is how I'm getting out of my day-to-day activities like at all, right? And that's for me, it comes super helpful because having a rest does not necessarily mean you have to just lay down on the sofa and just do nothing. That's also a very nice skill from sometimes I'm practicing it. But for me, it's actually just a context switch, which makes me rest. And this is my context switch. So I have my bass guitar just standing right behind me together with my bike and all that stuff. So like if I'm feeling that I'm just reaching that threshold when I'm just losing the traction and the focus, I just switch the context immediately, either to guitar or I do some very short bike ride just to free up my mind. And this is how I do disconnect. And this is awesome thing to do that through music, through sports, through something that is, I would say, through something that is not known to you. Any kind of activities, even if you read Wikipedia on the history of Iceland of 11th century, perfect. I mean, if that helps, and this is something that is interesting for you, that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, everyone has this thing. It's just a matter of discovery, that thing that disconnects you and takes you all. Because I think that one of the conditions to make this happen, it should be super interesting to you, right? This is my take on this particular problem.
That's a good one. So, that's a really good conversation, and we could go deep dive, and but the time flies, and I would like to wrap up. And for the final, I have the question for you, like, what are the top advices, like 2 or 3 maybe, what you could give for the people who just starting with the remote working experience? So how not go crazy and keep all the work-life balance. So what are the top 3 things what you would suggest?
Right. So number one, keep your rituals, right? When you were going to office, you used to have some sort of rituals. You woke up, you brush your teeth, you had a cup of coffee, then you probably walked into the office or you drove a car, right? Just keep them, right? Because that prepares you for that shift. That okay, now I start working. Right, that's the number one. The same like 1.A. Do the same when you have to wrap up, right? All the same way you're doing in the office. Okay, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or whatever the time you're supposed to end your work day. Just do the same ritual. Just close down the laptop and just walk away. Right, you're done for the day. Right, this is the first one. The second one, if possible, make yourself an untouchable area, right? Even if it's an artificial wall made of anything, right? You should have an area to hide and focus. Even if you're living in a one-room apartment, it's still possible to have this physical distinguishment between work zone, right, and free time zone, right? So what I'm saying is you should only work in one place. You shouldn't work on your table, on your sofa, on your kitchen, in your toilet, should you like to, right? It should be very well-defined place where you work and where you spend the rest of your time. That helps a lot to switch this context. Like when you reach out to that place, okay, I'm at work. When you stand up, and for example, I have a couple of stairs. When I go down, I'm not at work, even if it's the middle of my work day, right? So it's absolutely useful to have this distinguishment because it helps to switch the context. And probably the third one, well, take it easy. I mean, nobody is going to die if you are going to finish tomorrow. And this is the most important thing. Say no if you have other plans, or if you want some time for yourself, or if you feel tired. Nobody is going to die because of your no. Your company is not going to collapse at all. I think that the company is going to be at very disadvantaged position if you're burning out, because working remote, it's becoming a real problem, right? Just take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I would say, like, as well, if your company doesn't have these coffee chats or the icebreakers, implement them so you still keep connected with your colleagues, right?
Absolutely.
Would you get
And
back
maybe
to the yeah? Go on.
get to know your neighbors, right? Because especially in apartment buildings, you have so many people around you. Just get to know them, because during the lockdown, I got to know all the neighbors I'm living with, and it was also super fun, because now I'm more disconnected at work because of the remote work, but I know all my surroundings. I know people around me, and this is also awesome.
Yeah. In my case, my closest neighbor is around 1 kilometer from here, but I guess it's easier to connect with my customers or the colleagues. The question, would you go back to the office life?
Never again. If I have to choose jobless or office, jobless.
Okay, I hope it's not you're not going to have this type of the choice. And on this positive note, let's wrap up the session. And Volodymyr, it was a really interesting topic, and I think a lot of the people can correlate and to that. And I hope some of them have found the answers, especially on the work-life balance or how to get not disconnected with the colleagues and all other things. So thank you, Volodymyr, for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me here, and I really hope that my story will just help to figure out the new way of living, basically.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, I hope you have enjoyed the last conversation, and we are finalizing our Just Another build-up. Thanks to all attendees, organizers, and Intellias for your participation and for the joining our Cloud Builders community. Also, we want to know your feedback. So here is a link in the chat where you can share your experience. So our next build-up will be better and more useful for you. Stay tuned and see you soon, Cloud Builders.